We're in your anatomy book today, and this is the chapter on growth, development, and aging, page 652. So at this point, you should have already watched your reproductive system, so you know how the male and the female body works. This chapter is on now the pregnancy, as well as what happens after the birth happens. So we're going to start with the pregnancy. So prenatal means before birth, postnatal means after birth. So prenatal begins at the moment of pregnancy through the day of birth, the moment of birth. And then postnatal starts at the moment of birth and ends when you die. So all of us are in our postnatal period. It makes us feel younger, right? Now, when we get to coding, we don't usually use the word prenatal. We usually use the word antenatal. They mean the same thing. In med term, pre and ante mean exactly the same thing. It means before. So you'll see antenatal when we get to coding about pregnancies. But most of the time we use the word prenatal when we talk anatomy. So prenatal, of course, has to start with conception. And so we have to get the egg and the sperm together to fertilize the egg. And the initiation of creation of the baby begins. Typically about 39 weeks later is when the baby is born. The study of that growing fetus we call embryology, which is the study of what's going on inside the mama's belly. So the first phase of that is, so we have fertilization to implantation. So we have to get the egg and the sperm to meet up, and then we have to implant in the uterus. Typically, the fertilization takes place out here in the fallopian tubes. Implantation is way over here in the uterus. So once that egg has been fertilized, it still has a way to travel to get to where it needs to go to start growing. During that time, that egg is on its own. It is not connected to the mother yet. So all of the nutrition that it needs to do this part, this phase of the pregnancy, it has to have in itself. Okay. So let's talk about the chicken egg. When a chicken egg is fertilized and it's going to grow into a baby chicken, that egg never attaches to its mother. It's completely separate from the chicken. And so all of the energy that egg needs, all of the nutrition to grow into the baby chicken is inside the egg. Very similar with the human body, except we only need enough nutrition to get us to implantation, and then the human mother takes care of it. So we don't need it quite as long as the chicken egg needs it, but it works in the same way. Our nutrition is in that yolk, just like the chicken. So we have different phases, and we call this group of cells different things at different pieces of the phase. So we start out here, and the egg and the sperm find each other. Immediately, the egg starts a cycle of steps to kickstart the creation of the baby. And mitosis simply means dividing of cells. So right here, we've got the first mitosis, and the cells are now called a zygote. It says it down here too. The zygote lasts just a few days, about 3 days. Lots of things are happening inside, and about 3 days later, we now call it a morula. And then the morula lasts another few days, continues a whole cycle of events on the inside, And then we call these cells a blastocyst. Blasto in med term means immature. Immature cells. Then it implants into the mother. The placenta starts growing, and we now have a connection to the mother for nutrients and oxygen coming through the placenta. The placenta is growing here, and we have this bag going around the baby called the chorion, and inside there is the amniotic fluid. So the baby's floating there in this fluid, and of course baby's really tiny, so is the bag at the beginning, and it continues to grow throughout the pregnancy. We have different phases of the growth period for the baby. We call them trimesters. So we split the time that it takes baby to grow into 3 sections, a trimester. And different things happen during different trimesters. And we call the cells different things during different trimesters. So in the first trimester, call them, well, as I said, we call them the zygote, then we call them the morula, then they become the blastocyst. Then they become an embryo, and that goes from the blastocyst to the embryo until we get to about 8 weeks into the pregnancy. We call this an embryo during that first trimester. As we move into the second trimester, and actually the third trimester, we call it a fetus. During this time inside mama's belly, we have to create the whole human being that's going to come out 40 weeks later. We go from a cluster of cells that is completely undistinguishable as to what it is into a full human being. So we have different layers here. We have the endo, the ecto, and the meso, inside, middle, and outside layer. Different things come from these different germ layers. Here is your breakdown. Your ectoderm layers is your skin, your teeth, your eyes, your ears, your bones, etc. Mesoderm, kidneys and muscles and bones and adrenal glands and the circulatory system. And then the endo is your linings, some of the different ductworks, more of the glands. It's just which part is making which part of the human being to put them together. So we have the terms histogenesis and organogenesis. Genesis means creation or formation. Histo is tissue. Organo, hopefully is obvious, it means organs. So the study of the different tissues is the histology. Creation is the histogenesis, and then the organs is organogenesis or organology, depending on what you're trying to say with that phrase. Here's your breakdown of the growth of the baby, where different things are happening. You can see that the central nervous system, the brain and the spine, starts being created first, way back at the 3rd week of pregnancy. Most of us women do not even know we're pregnant at this point. We're barely late on a period. We're not taking a pregnancy test yet, and that's already happening. Then the heart, then your extremities, and you can see it goes from a very fetal position clump, and then it starts extending out, and the legs come out, and the arms come out of it, etc., and then it keeps growing from there. Baby's now grown, ready to be born. And there are different phases of the birthing moments. Okay. Parturition just means the period around birth or the process of birth. The uterus gets to a point where it says, okay, our job is done here. It gets irritable, basically saying things need to move here, we're done. And the contractions happen. We already talked about the hormones that come from the pituitary gland that are sent down to tell that muscle to start contracting, and it's time for baby to be born. Stages of labor. There are 3 stages of actual labor. Most of us forget about stage 3. Stage 1 is when the contractions start until the cervix is fully dilated. So I think of that as my labor, is all of the I feel icky, the pain, the whatever. Stage 2 is the actual pushing. It's the time from the cervix is fully dilated or opened up until the baby actually comes out. So that's your pushing phase. And then stage 3 is the one people forget about. Baby's out. This is now the placenta coming out because we no longer need it. There's no baby anymore. The placenta's job is done, and the body basically detaches it and pushes it out just like the baby. How long this takes is different from every woman. Stage 1, average 6 to 24 hours. Stage 2 could be super fast or up to an hour, and I've actually been on both ends of that extreme. My first baby took forever to come out, pushing wise. My last baby, slid right out. And maybe that's the difference of an experienced mom versus the new mom. Who knows? And then the placenta usually follows within about 15 minutes after that. Immediately upon birth, the baby is given a test. Baby, you're born and it's time to have a test. Get used to it. This is life. The APGAR score scores the baby as either a 0, a 1, or a 2 on 5 different things. Their heart rate, respiratory, muscle tone, skin color, and the response to stimulus. So there's 5 things and you get a maximum of 2 points each. So a 10 is a perfect APGAR score. They typically do this immediately, and then 10 minutes later, they'll do it again. So if the baby was low in any area, hopefully within the 10 minutes that the score goes up. This is just like an immediate evaluation on the health of the baby immediately. Now, in the end, this score really means nothing. That doesn't mean if you score low that your baby's in trouble. Maybe they just need some oxygen. Maybe they need something else immediately. Neonatal care has gotten amazing, and the survival rates of babies are through the roof. So that's fabulous. Sometimes women, their stage 1 of their labor is going awfully slow. We can give oxytocin, which is the same hormone coming from the brain. We can give a synthetic version. It's called Pitocin, and that can help speed up delivery if the woman needs it. There's also plenty of times where delivery is not happening the way it should, and we need to end up delivering that baby by a C-section because for some reason the vaginal delivery is starting to endanger either the mother or the infant for some reason. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter, and when she was in the process of being born, my daughter never could get past about dilated to a 7. It got stuck. She never got past that. Baby, we had some issues with baby coming into the birth canal, etc. They ended up doing a C-section. It turned out that her head was too large for my daughter's pelvic opening. She's actually my stepdaughter, and she's a very, very thin girl. And her pelvic opening just was not large enough for this baby's head. And my granddaughter was actually born with bruising across her forehead from where her head was hitting the pelvis bone repeatedly as the body was trying to put her into the birth canal, and it wasn't going to happen. And she had bruising from it. So we were very thankful that we went ahead and made the decision. My daughter made the decision, to go ahead and have a C-section because vaginal birth was never going to happen. And so a lot of women, for various reasons, a vaginal birth just isn't going to happen. Okay, I'm going to stop here with this video and start up again with the multiple births.